All right. Good morning, folks. Glad you could join us on a Friday. Thank God it is Friday. I'm going to have a nice day. It's not going to rain in Florida until later this afternoon. Thank God. I'm going to try to escape to the beach later because my daughter, Alex, whose bedroom I am in yet again doing this, officially graduated today with honors. You go, Alex. Got her stole, did the whole camp trade and all that thing. And in the weirdest graduation I've ever been part of, it was a car parade at her high school. Thank you, COVID. But hey, it happened. It was cool, and we're moving on. So everybody, good morning. Welcome to the 40th episode of FinTech Insider, the Breakfast Show. 40 of these so far, man. That is crazy. I am Sam All, 11FS Managing Director of North America. I'll be your host. Do let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear where our viewers are based. Share the link on this stream. So grab that share button, click on it, and post it. Hit the like button, and please subscribe to 11FS. And also, if you haven't read our latest research report, the link's in the post here, but it's really fantastic. It's all about the needs of small business owners in the U.S. and how financial institutions can make the propositions better and actually serve them for their needs. Head over to bit.ly/DIGITASMB or click the link in this post. All right, everybody, grab a cup of coffee. I'm going to do what I always do. I'm actually sharing this. So look at that. I'm doing what I recommended y'all do. I just shared this. So everybody, let's talk about 3 news stories from the past 24 hours that caught my attention, and they should have yours because they're cool stories. First one, Forbes has reported that Mark Cuban, the billionaire owner of the Dallas Mavericks, Shark Tank dude, and guy who's all over the place, Mark is striving to make sure minority and women-owned businesses get their slice of the PPP pie. When asked what was sparked this idea, Cuban quickly pointed out to VC investor Arlen Hamilton. She's the founder and co-managing partner of Barclays Capital. Hamilton co-authored an op-ed for Fast Company with Gusto COO Lexi Reese, which detailed how COVID-19 has exposed new depths of economic imbalance in America for both employees and small businesses, and how to close existing funding gaps to support business owners. Hamilton made sure that Cuban saw the op-ed, which included some alarming data. So Mark told Forbes that Hamilton was the inspiration behind Wednesday's tweets, and that she surely deserves the credit on this. And we just so happened to have interviewed Arlen. Our interview will go out at, I believe, 11 a.m. Eastern today. So right as we wrap this up, our interview with Arlen will go out the door. And I had a really good time talking with her. Second story, TechCrunch. They noted today that Starling Bank, the UK-based challenger bank founded by banking veteran Ann Bowden, and a good friend of 11FS, has raised an additional £40 million in funding. TechCrunch learned the round was led by existing backers and adds to the £60 million raised in February this year. Now boasting 1.4 million accounts, including 155,000 business accounts, Starling Bank has raised their total of £363 million since launch in 2014. Well done to the team. I've spent a lot of good time there, and I'm pretty bullish on Starling. And last but not least, Bloomberg is reporting FinTech's Money 2020 still plans to take place in Vegas this October. And I can back that up because I'm supposed to speak there. We'll see. Organizers the event, among the largest for financial technology and payments executives, said on Thursday they plan on doing this in October in Vegas, but they're going to cap attendance at 6,000. Last year's crowd was a little north of 10,000. Safety measures, including self-service registration and additional hand sanitizing stations, are planned to limit the spread of the coronavirus. Watch this space, folks. I don't know what to say. We'll see. So on that note, let's bring in our guest. Today, we're very happy to be joined by Olga Bartnicki, Managing Director at Barclays Accelerator. On today's show, we're going to talk about Olga's extensive experience in the investment space and learnings she has taken from that to be a mentor for other people. Hello, Olga. How are you this morning?
Doing well here in Woodstock, New York.
And I love Woodstock. And let's go ahead and get this out of the way because we talked about it before the show started. Anyways, how many dogs do you have?
2.
And I already told Olga this. I have 2. My whole thing is I know if I'm going to like somebody right out the gate, if they have dogs, don't judge me. That's how this goes. And what kind of dogs are they, Olga?
German short-haired pointer and a Wiedla, hunting dog.
I love. Oh, and I actually, hey, folks, I actually got somebody from Jacksonville, Florida on here. Lauren, you're getting a shout out because Lauren, I am in Eagles Landing. That's where I live, and doing this from my 18-year-old daughter's bedroom. My 2 dogs are 2 rescue dog mutts. that are running around the house somewhere. But hey, if we hear a dog bark, that makes this more fun, in my opinion. So Olga, you've got a fascinating backstory. We're going to talk about Barclays. That's why you're on. We'll talk about the accelerator. But I find your story rather unique, and I love it because, correct me if I'm wrong, you're originally from Moscow. You came to the U.S. when you were about 18. Is that right?
Yes.
And how did you go from Moscow coming to the U.S. at 18 and ended up going to University of Colorado in Boulder and getting into this space?
Yeah, my path was around 14 years old when I started having thoughts that I was born in the wrong country. By the time I was 18, that thought became quite prominent. And I was looking for ways to not live in Russia and go somewhere where being an entrepreneur was a possibility. So I guess I pursued my American dream, ended up here at 18 years old on my own. I didn't come with a family. I had $140, a tourist visa.
I love stories like this. I love stories like this.
The tourist visa expired in 3 months. $140 ran out sooner than that. So here you are. What do you do? I took every immigrant style job you can imagine. I was a babysitter for a family. I worked in a restaurant, in a Mexican restaurant, washing dishes. I worked in a party balloon store selling balloons. So, anything and everything you could do as a recent immigrant. I ended up in Colorado, and this is where my story changed. I started thinking that in order to get somewhere, you almost should already imagine being there. And I started attending classes in the University of Colorado at Boulder, even though I didn't have a penny to pay for classes, though professors would allow me to sit in, thinking that I was tenacious and really cared about the content. So after a while, I got noticed by one of the professors, and he introduced me to a venture capitalist. Back then, I didn't even know what a venture capitalist was, who said, after speaking with me for about 2 hours, you're a classic entrepreneur, even if you don't know it, you know it. I've been one. I see it 1,000 miles away. My job now as a venture capitalist is to find people like this and invest in them. I will pay for your education. You don't owe me a penny. In fact, I will put you to work in one of the startups we just put some money in, so you already can get a sense of what it is like to be a member in a very, very early stage company. But you have to give me your word that someday you will do something significant for someone else. And it is your choice when, where, or how. This is why I'm here now.
So Veronica from Truist, who's done a lot of these, said, yeah, when she came to the U.S., she had $100. Shad Khan, who owns the Jacksonville Jaguars, he also owns one of the Premier League teams in the UK. When he came to the U.S. in Chicago, I think he had like $17, right? Barely spoke English, and now he's a multi-billionaire. These type of stories of folks with this drive in them, despite about what anything you can read about our times, it's one of the most inspiring things for me. Whenever I go to New York, Olga, I love to go to Battery Park and read that little plaque about immigrants and folks coming to the U.S. And what just the drive and power that they have. My grandfather was like that. My grandfather was a Polish Jew from Warsaw. They came to the U.S., didn't speak the language, knew nothing, became a doctor in Nowhere, Kansas, by the way. Nowhere, Kansas. So these type of stories are my favorite things. And I've asked a couple people about you, and I keep getting the same thing. You are the definition of an entrepreneur, is what I was consistently told. Why do you think this is what people call you when I ask them to describe you?
I am driven by something that probably comes from my childhood. My family has a few very strong-willed, determined individuals in it, sadly, with sad histories. And I also have a drive that was determined by my father being an inventor. And while he was inventing interesting ideas, none of them became a reality. They ended up being pieces of paper, kind of like an equivalent of a patent in the Soviet times, that just stood on a shelf and collected dust. And when people would come over, he would tell me what he invented, and everyone will get really excited and think how amazing it was. He was a really forward thinker in electrical engineering, working on electric engines, which are only relevant now, really. So he was really far ahead of his time, inventing fantastic things, and nothing was real. So as an entrepreneur, I became an individual who was driven by the idea that you have to make things real. An idea is not of much value if we can't actually build something from it. So this idea of building constantly drives me. I feel that, if I'm alive, I need to build something. So, and I guess it just sort of is in me, and and it just shows. So.
And correct me here if I'm wrong. That path as an entrepreneur, as a startup founder, it looks good in the movies. In reality, it's damn hard. Your first two companies weren't exactly a success. Is that accurate?
Well, they failed. That would be very accurate.
I don't know if I call them, but a great learning experience. But then after that, but don't you agree? I mean, sometimes you got to go through that fire a little bit in that experience. But after the first two, you kind of, you found your way, right? I mean, you were able to see some success.
I did, and I failed with a healthcare startup. I failed with a music segment startup, and then I succeeded with a screen sharing startup, which actually I have some interesting insights from, and also with an e-commerce marketplace.
So I'm curious, and we'll pivot right out of this. Like I told you, I'd go down rabbit trails. That's what I like to do, and we're going to go to Barclays right after this. But you talked about some of those lessons. One, the healthcare space right now, a lot of it's timing, is it not? Because the healthcare space right now, I'd say, is radically being changed. I mean, you look what's happening with Lemonade just in New York. You look at a lot of the solutions that are out there. So timing does play into this, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Our healthcare startup failed mostly due to timing. We had a great team. We had a pretty awesome idea, really. And we had some early traction. And we eventually decided to not continue because doctors wouldn't be consistently e-prescribing. It wasn't a habit that they really kind of would adopt. Only months after we decided to close the company, a law came out that actually required doctors to prescribe. So they had to change their behavior. But instead, my sales effort trying to convince them that it's good for them, that it's more efficient, that it's great for everybody, for patients, for them, there is a record. Trying to communicate the value of the product over and over and over and over just wasn't sticking at that time. It was a little too early. Now everyone is equipped.
Yeah, exactly. All right, look, we're 15 minutes in. I've got to talk about Barclays but I do want to circle back because we've had some great questions coming in about your experiences that I will get to. But let's quickly give Barclays a shout out. So you're with Barclays Accelerator. Can you kind of give us a 30-second snapshot? What is it? What is y'all's focus?
Well, we are early stage fintech accelerator. We look for talented teams in fintech, and we fund them and we help them succeed. That's what we do. And Barclays is probably one of the, it has probably the largest portfolio of fintech startups in the world. I've been looking around and I don't see anyone having 180 fintech startups in their portfolio. That's a lot. And what else is interesting about us? Kind of like the power of the network that Techstars bring to it results in the very interesting data that 90% of all those companies, it's been 180 since the inception of the accelerator, 90% of them have been either acquired or operational right now.
So at 11FS, we actually love the Barclays team. When we set up our New York office initially as a trial run, we did it out of Barclay Rise in Flatiron because I like the neighborhood. For one, I love the team there, and this is something that I think is interesting about the accelerator, the management team. It's yourself, Olga, and correct me if I'm wrong. It's you, It's Mary Kate Cochran and Kelly Fryer, right?
That's right.
So you got an incredibly strong leadership team there that just so happens to be 3 incredibly strong women and 3 incredibly unique and different folks. That's what I love about it.
Sure.
And one of the things I actually like, Olga, I do this a lot. I mean, LinkedIn is LinkedIn. It is what it is. But when I like to read through recommendations every now and then of the guests I'm going to have on the show, and this is something, one person wrote this about you, but I saw this come up over and over again. Olga lives and breathes the lean and agile methods as a way to quickly launch and inexpensively. When did you come to embrace that? Was that in those early startups that you did?
No, the early startups that I did not have the lean method, and this is actually why I respect it so much.
Oh, good.
Having seen how I've built startups early on versus how I build startups now, and actually been a participant of both, makes you respect the lean method profoundly. The reason being is back in the 90s when I was an entrepreneur, it took probably about $1.5 million on average to launch any company. Building out the technology is what you did first, and the costs were about that to get off the ground. Lean method, and if you really follow it, allows you to experiment and launch something, for a few $1,000s. That's profound in that it allows for much higher quantity of innovation, if you will, because it costs less. So not only more teams can afford, if you will, to try things, but even one entrepreneurial individual can potentially work on a couple of ideas. And if he or she is running them in a lean method and they can bootstrap them, they can test and see what is in demand and only then start raising capital and grow the company. I think that's quite profound for us as a human race in terms of the quantity of innovation that we can produce.
And for the audience, who, by the way, in the comments section, Barclays Rise and Barclays Accelerator is getting a lot of love. You currently have this accelerator set up in New York and London, correct?
That's right.
Because somebody just noted, Sushant noted, Barclays Rise is playing a valuable contribution through Rise Mumbai also. So I know that Rise has a couple of offices across the globe, because I know Mary Kate, who's a good friend, that obviously helps drive those. It's an incredible setup, everybody. It's one of those. Sidharhar, who's on this all the time, is talking about this. He's based in San Francisco. He goes, there's lots of successful companies that began in accelerators. You think about Dropbox, you think about Airbnb, and those that didn't. So yeah, Google, Facebook. What factors should a founder or founding team consider when deciding whether or not to join an accelerator? Good question, Sidharhar.
Well, I think when you're thinking about an accelerator, a couple of things come to mind. First, you need to pick the right one that will get you where you're going. You need to sort of look where you're at, where you're going. Is accelerator a good sort of accelerant to get you there, for the lack of a better word? Our job is to propel you. So are we the right one to propel you forward? You would know that by speaking with us. The other one is, it's interesting, it's a little bit of a psychology element here as well. You may have already had some product market match, and normally it's quite early on. But what an accelerator does, it also tests your team. Yeah. If you have a relationship with a co-founder that's in a certain state, going through something like an accelerator stresses the relationship, if you will, because a lot of mentorship and advice and things come at the both of 3 of you, say, or 4 of you, and it's an intellectual challenge and it's an emotional challenge all at the same time, and it allows you to really solidify your relationship. Or sometimes you will find out maybe certain things are coming out of your co-founders that you didn't know, and you need to understand how you will change your relationship to work through those things. So I like an accelerator as in both intellectual and emotional stressor, and a deliverable stressor where you're accelerating your company all at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, that concept of chemistry matters a lot, right? And the people that you're working with, you don't have to be best friends, but you have to be able to respect the people you're working with, and what I would say, what I've seen work best is when you're going into these, that you're willing to actually listen. Like I tell my kids constantly. And by the way, we have had a dog sighting behind you, which is that the black and white speckled dog, which is beautiful. So,
German short-haired pointer.
oh God, what's the dog's name?
Siegfried, German name.
Siegfried. Oh my God, it's like okay. It's a great name. I love that name. Christopher asked, he's actually based in Manila and he does a lot with digital partnerships out there. He says, is there any plan to get a portfolio going in Asia and specifically in the Philippines?
Well, we don't have a plan to open an accelerator there. However, as the two locations in New York and London, we are constantly looking for startups around the world.
Yeah.
We have very international cohorts, and you're very, very welcome to apply.
So there you go. Good answer, by the way. And also great places in the world to learn from, right? I mean, every spot that you have the community around there, the tech community, the folks that you can tap into are great. And I personally haven't been through an accelerator like this, but I would also imagine going through a like experience with other startups helps too, right? I know Laura Speakerman, who was with is one of the co-founders of Alloy, had gone through this, and she said that's one of the things she enjoyed the most was the interaction with other founders. What
I think about is I was a venture investor during internet bubble times, and then I was a founder during 2008 financial crisis of a screen sharing company of all things. Today, the benefits of screen sharing is kind of obvious to every single one of us. In 2007 and 8, I had a hard time, again, describing the value, creating use cases, proving to people that it's actually useful. And they would sort of, yeah, well, but you can sort of make this. Which, again, goes back to sometimes you're a little bit ahead of time and you need to have the tenacity and the optimism and the perseverance to keep going as a founder at times. What you sort of see through that is that in 2007, what we did not have, there was no connection between entrepreneurs. You kind of really worked with your co-founders. You maybe knew or met a few other entrepreneurial teams when you were pitching together, say, to angel groups. But you really kind of felt a bit alone. You were kind of alone against the world. I think what we have now, what's profound, it's both being a part of an accelerator, but also even what we're doing here right now, we're forming a community, right? When you have a community and when you see what others doing, when you can have some reference points, when you can support each other, there is material difference. For example, in this downturn, there is significantly fewer instances of your term sheet, if you received it before the crisis, turning extremely ugly on you. And that is because we as a community are strong, and investors, have a certain sense that doing something like this would not really be what the community would welcome. Back in 2007 or 8, a lot of term sheets turned ugly on you. So I think the power of the community, the power of the network, both what we are building here as a fintech community, and also when you come to an accelerator, you feel another stronger sense of community. Those are quite important.
So I got a good question come in from Luca. And Luca had made a great comment, similar to your story. He left Italy to come to the US to help build a company. And he said, many new accelerators seem to be more thematic oriented. Olga, which advances, if any, do you see compared to more generic offerings? Make sure I read that right. Yep.
I would say this. I, in general, believe that accelerators, because they are extremely early stage investors, should not focus very much on themes or trends. And that is because by the time you and I can articulate what a trend or a theme is, in a way, you're already too late. For Series A or B investors, that is the approach. You have a theme, you have a sort of point of view with which you're investing. When you're doing something like what we do on as early of a stage, you want to be doing something that's not yet articulated as a bullet point or a trend. So I think you should be looking for an accelerator that's an early investor that is not saying, okay, there is AI, let's all do AI, and who is looking for talented teams, unusual ideas, and who appreciate and respect that.
Good answer. All right. So a follow-up question on that from Siddhar. And a couple of folks all said, oh, thank God for you for asking this question. What are the pros and cons of a corporate accelerator versus VC-driven accelerators like Y Combinator?
Yeah, well, the way we look at what we do and why it's unique. We do what Techstars does, which is kind of bring the entrepreneurial grit and how to launch, how to go about things, how to scale, all the kinds of things that you would get probably in another accelerator, like say 500 Startups or Y Combinator, or any other fantastic accelerator. To add to that, we have another set of mentors, which are Barclays Mentors, which bring a very specific and particular viewpoint that if you're working in fintech, it's quite important and healthy to have. If you don't understand how a bank thinks, if you don't understand the challenges they have, if you don't have an appreciation for the fact that they're highly regulated and their decision making is quite different in some other sectors, if you don't feel it with your own skin, and then you don't understand that sort of like the industry that you are in. So having direct interactions with different individuals from different parts of Barclays makes you sort of see and experience how they are experiencing the financial sector, and therefore it allows you to position your product and position your value prop in the way that the segment understands. And in that, I think there is a lot of value for you as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, the one thing that always stands out to me, if you're building a product that you're going to be servicing banks, for example, like what Alloy did in Laura Spikerman. And so, community banks or larger banks are going to be your customers. Understanding how they operate, understanding how to, the importance of sponsorship and how procurement works and everything else, getting that direct feedback from especially an FI the size of Barclays, right, with a global footprint, is priceless. So personally, I understand that component of it as someone who's had to live through this. And I also have great friends at 500 Startups. Mike Seagal is a good friend, and at Y Combinator. And I think a lot of it gets back to the fit, right? And which means spend some time with them. Which you'll love. Olga's already got like 3 folks in the stream going, okay, I'm reaching out to Olga. I got a company. All right. So that said, I unfortunately got to wrap up pretty soon, but I do want to get this question in because it came up earlier. So based on your experience, this is a very philosophical question for this early in the morning, but we're going to go there. So Lauren asked, do you feel the American dream is still real or possible for immigrants? I'd love to get your opinion, and I'd like to get some feedback on that too.
I absolutely do. I think how you go about it may be slightly different now, 40 years later.
Yeah.
And there are certain different sort of pitfalls that you would need to avoid. But by the way, just the lean method that I'm such a big fan of, and allow you to come to experiment inexpensively, to learn, to absorb a lot quickly, and to use all the best methods that we know in order to launch an idea and become successful. I certainly do believe in it. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I didn't.
Yeah, and I'll give my 2 cents. I grew up in Detroit, and without money. I think some of you have heard my backstory. Grew up rather poor. I had a mom that had multiple sclerosis, so we were basically bankrupt at an incredibly early age. So not the nicest part of Detroit, not with a lot of money. So I went into the military, and I spent close to a dozen years between the Army and the Navy. And I served in the first Gulf War. I've been around a little bit. Stories like Olga's, stories like Luca's, stories like Shad Khan's that I had shared. I know we're living in difficult times. I mean, you look what's happening in Minnesota right now and across the U.S. I still sincerely believe in the American dream. I still think it can be accomplished, but I also believe it's necessary for every single one of us to do our part in supporting that. That's why I love what you're doing, Olga. There's my speech. I'm going to leave it there. Don't be a spectator. How's that? Get in the arena. That's the quote I love the best. Get in the damn arena. Don't sit on the sidelines and be part of it. You want to help somebody? Mentor. Flat out mentor. That's why I love what you're doing, Olga. That's why I love Barclays Accelerator and the team there, and that's why they're all good friends. And unfortunately, we've run out of time. There were some other great questions I don't want to ignore. Some good questions coming from, I think it was Thomas at Boston Consulting Group. I'll snag these and send them over to you, Olga, so you can reply. But folks, we're out of time. So Where's the best place for people to find out and interact with you, Olga, and also learn more about Barclays Accelerator?
Well, I'm easy to reach. I'm Olga at techstars.com, and you can literally find us on the internet, Barclays Accelerator. We pop up. You can go to Techstars website and find us that way as well.
And you're probably going to get about 3 or 4 companies pinging you in about 5 minutes. Everybody, thanks for joining today. Have a great weekend. On Monday, I'm joined by Rob Blackwell. I love Rob. Rob was the former editor-in-chief at American Banker. Some of his stories are incredible that he lived through. He's now with the Promontory Interfinancial Network. His interview with Mark Cuban on PPP is one of my favorite podcasts. And it's like his second interview that he did. Again, if you know someone who'd be perfect to come on the show, don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach out to me at Sam Mall on Twitter is a great place to do it, or at breakfastshow@11fs.com. Everybody, enjoy your weekend. And love the dogs, by the way. They were great. Best part of the show. See you, everybody.